I don't think I experienced true gratitude until that third experience, and I experienced it palpably, like it was a thing. It wasn't just this word. So it came into my body. I embodied that sense of gratitude. And I spent most of the night, dancing around, saying to people, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." And I was grateful for everybody, grateful for the person dancing next to me, grateful for the curandero for bringing the medicine up, grateful for my many friends who were in the circle with me, grateful that that I wasn't dead, because I should have been dead in 2013 and I didn't. I was just grateful for everything. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out for Ouroboros Story Hour, Season 4, Episode 1. So last August, we just celebrated our third anniversary. So I'm your host and producer, Bob Cohen. I'm a dad, writer, teacher, and bluesman. I'm currently working on a memoir about the role plant medicines and psychedelics have played in helping me with depression, anxiety, and preparing for old age. I used to have a euphemism for that, but I'm actually as I'm moving along in my journey, I'm owning that that's the direction I'm going. So now I say I'm preparing for my old age. Ouroboros Story Hour is now an international monthly unscripted storytelling production that features people sharing stories about experiences with healing and visionary plants, psychedelics, and consciousness hacking practices. Our mission is to promote a deep personal and societal healing and radical acceptance of ourselves and of others by sharing and witnessing people's stories. While unscripted storytelling is by definition performative, we do not look for performers. We open safe space on the Story Hour stage to people with deeply personal, often unprocessed stories. And that unprocessed is a big thing. It's really amazing to watch people as they kind of take that storytelling journey and go from not really necessarily understanding their experience to attaching a story to that experience and therefore creating some deeper understanding of it. So Ouroboros Story Hour invites anyone who's used plant medicines and psychedelics or practice other forms of consciousness hacking to share their experiences and insights. In our minds, the first timer stands on equal ground with the highly experienced. So my note here says we're lasting and we're growing. So August marked the end of our third year, and tonight begins our fourth. Our recent work with Thank You Plant Medicine for the World of Wisdom Festival in Gotland, Sweden, has shown us that there's a worldwide interest in healing plants and psychedelics. It's really, it was extraordinary. That experience I had producing Story Hour for 4 days in a row, where there were oftentimes I was the only American person in the Zoom call. And what I found most extraordinary with that experience was how people who spoke so many other languages were using my native language and using it with complete precision. It was so brilliant to see people express complex thoughts, complex feelings, and to know that they could do it in 1, 2, 3, or 4 other languages. So it was a very awe-inspiring experience for me. A few reminders. We gather to co-create unique moments for people to share their healing journeys with open-hearted listeners. So again, we're kind of like back on that radical acceptance theme. The next reminder that I like to give people is that the stories and views expressed by the storytellers belong to the people that share them. Story Hour is a substance-free event, so that also has more resonance when we're in a public space. But I really do sort of like to keep this focus as a substance-free event, even in terms of what you may or may not have taken before you show up. So I ask people to please refrain from bringing, distributing, or selling any substances during the event. And then the last reminder that I give people is that these medicines are they're safe, but they're very powerful. And if you're not careful, you can re-traumatize yourself. So it's important to make sure that you do your research before you ingest any of these substances. And it's also very important to make sure that that research include being really careful about who you do the medicine with. There's, as with many underground things, and actually even above ground things, there's a variety of people that that come into this practice, and they do it for lots of different reasons. And people are sort of all across the spectrum in terms of their sort of like healing and being a whole human being. And so we can encounter people who don't necessarily have our best interests in mind. And even though they've drunk a river of ayahuasca and they've served lots, they may not really be the most suitable person for you to have your experience with. So make sure you ask around, talk to people, do your research, and that way you can keep yourself safe and you can get the healing and the consciousness expanding that you hope for, rather than more trauma. Tonight we have four featured storytellers, and it's going to be it's an all-woman cast. We're going to hear from Suzanne Vaughn, Mareesa Stertz, Nicole Morales, and Kristen Davenport. Usually start out with a quickie little story. Sometimes they get long, but I'm going to try to keep this one on the short side. So I've been thinking all week about this weird nexus that I've had in my medicine work with gratitude and demons. And to this day, I'm not sure how they sort of end up happening in the same space and happen hand in hand with me all the time, but it does. And it kind of dates back to my third ayahuasca ceremony. I practice a form of ayahuasca drinking, we'll say, called Umbanda or Umbandaime. So it's a Brazilian tradition, and it's a syncretic religion that leans more toward the African side of the syncretic spectrum rather than the Christian side. And so there's more drumming, more dancing, more singing. It's not like it's a very active practice, and they work with three different medicines. So ayahuasca being the first one, the second one being a tobacco snuff called rape. So it's spelled R-A-P-E with an accent on the E, so it's rape, not rape, or the Brazilians pronounce it rape. And it's a very finely ground herbal medicine tobacco mixture with a bunch of other things. And the curandero, or the person that's serving, uses a device called a tepe, which is kind of like a straw with a bowl in it, and they put the snuff in there and they blow it into your nose, to both sides of your nostrils. And then there's a third medicine called sananga, which is an eye drop. And if you have ever wondered what it feels like to pour lighter fluid in your eyes and put a match to it, try sananga. It will do it for you. So as I worked my way into the ayahuasca practice, I didn't want to take all the medicines at once. I have this sort of like, materialist scientific mind. And so what I wanted to do was experience each of these things sort of in succession, so I could understand how each of those medicines shaped my experience. So first time I did the ayahuasca, second time I did the ayahuasca and hape, which was a wonderful, I think I might be one of the few people in the world that really love it, but I find it, I love hape and ayahuasca. And then in my third experience, I tried the sananga. So the hape's job is to ground you. I mean, if folks who've done ayahuasca know that you tend to kind of spin out into the farthest reaches or into the deepest recesses of your body, and you can kind of like lose track of your energy, and you can lose track of where you are in the process. And that hape just kind of like brings you back into your body. And it's a snap. Some people describe the sensation as it feels like someone has punched you in the brain, and it really is like it's like a snap. And it's a male spirit. So people often say that ayahuasca is a female spirit. They say that the tobaccos are male spirit. And then there's the sananga. So now the sananga's job is to help you see better. So the Amazonian natives used it to improve their night vision. And I'm told that sananga decalcifies our pineal gland, and that in fact it helps us see things. It helps us see the spiritual dimension, and more than without it. So by that third one, I struggled pretty hard. I struggled pretty mightily to kind of like get my bearings in non-ordinary reality. I mean, it was just the first time I couldn't get up off the floor. I spent myself the whole time curled up in a ball with my sleeping bag over my head, saying "Leave me alone." And then the second time I did it, I tried to actually crawl out of the ceremonial space, and they pulled me back in. So this third time, I I found that I was sort of like a little more used to. I got my ayahuasca legs, sort of like sea legs, right? So I was a little more comfortable in the space. And in the course of that third experience, this really crazy thing happened. We talk a lot about, in this sort of like love and light community or whatever, what our medicine community, we talk a lot about gratitude. People to do gratitude lists, and people talk all about how, yeah, you should be really grateful for things. And I've, like a lot of people, I've often said the words, but I don't think I experienced true gratitude until that third experience, and I experienced it palpably, like it was a thing. It wasn't just this word. It came into my body. I embodied that sense of gratitude, and I spent most of the night, dancing around, saying to people, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." And I was grateful for everybody. Grateful for the person dancing next to me. Grateful for the curandero for bringing the medicine up. Grateful for my many friends who were in the circle with me. Grateful that that I wasn't dead, because I should have been dead in 2013 and I didn't. I was just grateful for everything. So along comes the point in the night when it's time for Sananga. Now I've been in the space before. I've heard squealing. People put that stuff in and they're like, ah! I mean, it's it hurts. So we're lying in a circle. Our heads are facing into in toward the altar, and the people serving the medicine are sort of like going around one at a time, and like it's getting closer and closer. Like the screams are like and then it finally came to me. And the way it works is, you close your eyes, put the drops, run your eyes, open your eyes, and then blink a lot, because that's pretty much all you can do. And then with that this huge spike of pain, the harder you resist it, the more it hurts. And it's kind of like this weird counterintuitive thing where if you just open up to fully experience the pain, it makes it go away faster. And so there it went. And we're getting kind of into the tail end of the night. And so I'm sort of off of coming down off the peak from the ayahuasca, but not, still in non-ordinary reality. And I close my eyes, and what do I see but a scary ass demon? I'm like Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, like scary ass, like looking demon. And so I'm sort of buoyed up by this tremendous sense of gratitude for being alive, for being in this community. And I did something that was counterintuitive, or counter to what I might normally do when confronted with something scary. You know, I'm I come from a generation of where people mess with you, you fight, it's fist fight, you reach out, you don't let you attack, and I'm looking at this thing, and I suddenly felt grateful for his existence. And I looked, and not only did I feel grateful, but I also just I got this deep understanding of what it means to be a demon. Because as I kind of like, as I saw it in that moment, it was all about understanding that what a demon does is it attaches to you, and it hollows you out and uses you up, and then when you're done, you would then have to go out and find the next victim. But it's this like really sardonic pyramid scheme, and it all kind of like goes back to like some root demon. But it's those infections, like it's like we call it generational trauma sometimes. So, you know, that stuff just like it leaps from person to person to person to person with a direct link back to this, whatever the root demon is. And if you practice, if you know, if you come out of the Abrahamic tradition, I kind of think of Lucifer or Satan as, you know, an angel with daddy problems, right? His father, you know, he had a little trouble working things out with his father, and he said, "Oh, fine, fuck you, and I'm gonna show you what's what," and then kind of like things went forward from there. But anyway, so like I get this, you know, this demon comes to me, and I'm full of this gratitude, and I'm really I'm seeing this scary thing in a loving and grateful way, and I look at him and I go, how can I help you? I know that you want me. You can't have me. So this is a big thing for me, actually learning to set boundaries. I said, but if there's a way for me to help you, I will. I said, stay here, be with me. Let's talk. Let's help me understand. Help me understand what's going on with you. And it was sort of like, you know, the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, you know, with Mara, like invite your demons to tea. And in the act of doing that, there was this there were things that were able to happen that I was really shocked with, like to like be able to like open up that space. So over the course of the rest of the evening, another 4 or 5 demons came to visit me, and we had that sort of like same conversation. You know, how can I help you? And it's with and kind of where we left was like, well, we can be allies, or you can't be in my life. But I would prefer that I would prefer that we learn to become allies. And sort of like there it went. And when we finished the night, it just the like the I don't know how to say it. That's the hardest thing about these experiences is that we don't really have language for a lot of these experiences. But there was this lightning in my being that was just that I couldn't account for in any other way other than for having had that experience. And then a year later, I went to Ecuador on a vision quest, and that the way the way that practice works on the vision quest portion of it, you go up to the mountain with the clothes on your back, and you get put into a pen, and you stay there for 4 days and 4 nights with no food and water at all, and you're out there in the elements, and it just and I had a lot of trouble sleeping the first night because I couldn't let go of things. But the second night, when I sort of like finally started to let go, those same demons came back to me to check up on me. And so they it's funny. I'm just thinking about this right now because I've talked about like that experience before, and it was sort of like I have framed it in the past um, as me having to give my demons a refresher course on the boundaries. But as I'm really thinking about it right now, they came back to check up on me because we created an alliance. Because instead of pushing those things away that, you know, no doubt symbolize different aspects of myself that I don't like, I've learned to sort of fold those into who I am and accept myself, the good things, the bad things, the ugly things, the scary things, and that palpable gratitude. So the first person up is Suzanne. So Suzanne Vaughn offers therapeutic coaching and retreats for people healing from complex trauma and chronic stress. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner and trained in IFS, 2 modalities that are effective in resolving trauma. And Suzanne, maybe you'll tell me what IFS is because I'm not really sure. Um, and then she plans to share a story about healing her 8-year-old self. She witnessed her father kissing another woman. He gaslit her and tried to swear her to secrecy. She wasn't having it, and thus began a drastic change in her attunement to the world and herself. She healed with the help of the medicine and was able to become her 8-year-old self and fully feel the grief in the company of a man who sort of acted as I guess as a surrogate. and she was able to feel the grief and pain in a safe container. So, Suzanne, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob. I'll start. Internal family systems is what IFS is. It's a framework or a lens to look at your whole system as sub-personalities. Sort of like, you get invited to a party and you say, part of me wants to go, a part of me doesn't. So that's sort of like something everybody can relate to. And I actually used IFS during this journey I'm going to talk about. And it was, I think, the way I think about my own healing journey, which has been going on for really decades. And I discovered plant medicine a few years ago. The way I think about it is that I have a toolbox or a toy box, if you will, and I have different things that I can use. Plant medicine is one, IFS is another. So, I like to tell people that when I worked in corporate America and we had retreats or offsites and we had to present something personal, my boss would always tell me to go first because he knew I'd cry, and that would sort of open it up for other people if they had emotions. So I will say, it's already here, so I'm just going to honor it. And give it some space. And I thank everyone who is holding space for me. So when I was 8, almost 9, well, let me start here. I thought this would be a story about talking about my relationship with my dad and repairing it. But as I really contemplated what I wanted to share, I realized it's a story about healing myself and how that opened me up to acceptance and understanding and forgiveness. So when I was 8, my dad, he worked for Delta Airlines, and we had a barbecue every summer. And this summer I was playing in the sand, and my sister, who was 12, came over and said, hey, come with me. I have something to show you. So of course I do whatever my big sister says, and she brings me to the shoreline, and it's low tide, and she points out and says, see that couple? I'm like, shit, yeah, I see them. Just keep watching them. And as they get closer, I see them holding hands. I see them kissing, embracing, and they keep coming closer. And as they get close enough where maybe people could recognize them, they pull apart a little bit. They're still holding hands. And then they get closer and they pull apart completely. And she says, that's Dad. I was like, no, it's not. And the thing is it was. And my mom was not there because she was sick. She had a migraine. So she wasn't there this year. And I was a really assertive little kid, very curious and very open, very honest. And when we were packing up to go, I asked my dad, why were you kissing that woman? And he said, I wasn't kissing anyone, and don't you tell your mother. So in that moment, everything shifted. I couldn't trust him. I couldn't trust myself. I became hypervigilant. I became a parentified child. I started to look out for my mom. And I did tell her. And they separated. My father left. And I would say that began, if it wasn't, I don't have much memory before that. So if it wasn't happening already, that really began, as Bob said, my attunement to the world, where I became hypervigilant in a number of ways, where I would look for, how do I need to be to not get rejected? I got straight A's, didn't swear, didn't leave the house without permission. I was a good kid. All the adults liked me. Like I looked like a well-adjusted kid, but I wasn't. I was suffering. And I didn't feel seen. Anytime I did express true emotion, it was teased or made fun of. And so I learned to stuff that down. And actually, it served me really well. Everything served me really well until it didn't. So I had a successful career in technology. I presented, I was part of sales teams. From the outside looking in, my friends looked at my life and thought, oh, you've got a great life. You have a great job. You're independent. You're so strong and resilient. And I was definitely the go-to person. And in 2013, I decided I'd had enough of that. I had been working on myself all these decades, trying to figure out, who am I? I just didn't know. And how do I heal from this silent suffering that I have come to realize so many people suffer from? And I just decided I'm going to figure this out once and for all. And that led me down a path of becoming a healer. First, it started with coaching. And then when I left my corporate job in 2016, I discovered that that wasn't quite enough to do the permanent and transformative healing I wanted for myself and my clients. And I discovered somatic experiencing and IFS and plant medicine. And so, quite frankly, I thought I had done a lot of work with my relationship with my dad. He died in 2009. And I thought, well, this is it. This is what I'm left with. I can't expect him to talk to me anymore, to apologize. So I'm left to do this work on my own. And I really thought I had done quite a bit. But then fast forward to a year ago, I had already been using plant medicine. I had worked with ayahuasca and mushrooms. And this was actually my 5th ayahuasca journey. And it was the second night. The first night, I really struggled. As anyone who's done ayahuasca knows, there is usually some nausea that comes with it. And once you purge, there's sort of, at least for me, there's more of a sinking in, and more comes flooding in. So I really wanted to purge that first night, and I didn't. I suffered all night, and I just kept thinking, oh, these are not my people. I'm not their people. What am I doing here? I'll never do this again, which, some of that actually happens every time. Usually I'll never do this again happens every time in the beginning. And then it wasn't until about 8 o'clock the next morning when somebody asked me if I needed anything, and I pushed them away saying, no, I don't need anything. I just need to puke. And he put his hand on me and I immediately started puking. So I was like, okay, lesson learned. I'm the one who creates this boundary, this distance, this separation. And so the next night, I spoke with the person who was leading the ceremonies and asked, this is kind of rare for me because I'm very independent and I'm still learning to lean on other people. And I just thought, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. Let me just ask. So I asked for help. Like, how can I let go more easily? And she just said, just trust mama. I was like, okay, I'm going to trust her. I'm just going to trust her, whatever she brings. And so began the process of letting go. So I proceeded with the ceremony. I was feeling the visuals. I was feeling the nausea. It was probably, if I had to guess, like 45 minutes into an hour. And I started to feel that familiar feeling of, oh, you might purge. So I got up on all fours, and I'm a little bit excited because I'm like, yay, I'm going to purge. And then I'm going to have the whole night to just do work. And that feeling came, that sort of wave of, and here it comes. And at the last minute, it got taken away. I'm telling you, I started bawling. I was like, Mama, don't leave me. And in that moment, I knew what the issue was. It was abandonment. And I just let it all out. I just started sobbing. Didn't care who was next to me, who could hear me, none of that. And as I was doing this, it was just amazing. It was like, people talk about this mysticism and the mystical journey that can happen. And I so wanted that, but I have never experienced that before this. And I still got tons of value out of these journeys, but it was like my eyes, of course, are closed, but there was a world that opened up in front of me, and it was the earth. The earth opened up, and I could see my 8-year-old curled up in a fetal position in the left side of the open earth. There were 2 sides open. In the left side, I just reached down and I opened my eyes briefly because I felt like this power in my hands, and I looked at my hands and they had transformed. They still looked like hands, but there was just a knowing that these are healing hands. And I just reached down into the earth and held this beautiful 9-year-old and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I knew, it's like Bob was saying, it's hard to put words to this, but there was just a knowing that I am healing myself right now. The whole concept of reparenting had been quite elusive up until this moment. And I felt, I knew it. I'm reparenting myself. I'm giving her what she didn't have and she needed back then. And this went on for who knows how long. It felt like a long time. My eyes were swollen, or at least they felt it. My whole nose was gunked up. And the leader of this retreat kept saying, "Come up for your hape. If you're resisting, you're the one who needs it." And I was like, I want to, but my nose is full. Like, I can't seem to get it clear. So eventually, I got a message that I am I've done all the healing I can do for this part of myself. And as kind of a side note to this story, the next thing that happened was I got a message that I'm meant to heal my ancestors, and that was the right side. And so I reached down in there and I did a bunch of work, which maybe I'll save for another Ouroboros Story Hour, with my ancestors. And I did some IFS on myself and what was blocking me. And it was amazing. I was just blown away by the power of our own ability to heal with the assistance of these amazing plant medicine tools. So, but back to my 8-year-old, I realized I need to work with someone. And when I had first arrived at the retreat, I had seen one of the assistants, never met him before, but something told me that's the one. I didn't even know for what at the time, because it was the day before. But I went up for hape, and this was my second time working with hape, and it must have been much stronger because it totally blew me away. I did not expect it. And I thought, yes, the hape is going to make me purge. So then I'll be able to really do some work. Like, if I've done work already, it did not make me purge. So I was just like, okay, mama, thank you. Thank you for keeping this with me. But what I realized is every time I cried, I no longer felt the nausea. So I was purging. So I just leaned fully into that. And it just so happened that same assistant that I had seen was right behind me. And this sounds so dramatic, and I've never used this phrase before, but I just said, "Will you please lay your hands on me?" And he did. He put one hand on my head, one hand on my back, and he just intuitively would leave his hand and move it to different spots, exactly where I needed it. And I became this 8-year-old. I just completely embodied her and sobbed and sobbed. And he became the father I wanted. He became that surrogate father, really a male energy, a parental energy that was holding me and saying, you get to have whatever feelings you want, and there's nothing wrong with them. And so I probably sobbed for 20 minutes. It felt like a long, long time until those sobs started to quiet into just that type of breath, that exhausted breath. And then over time, that breath became a steady rhythm. And at that point I was done, and he could sense it. So he asked if it was okay to leave, and he went to help someone else. And at that point, I'm looking at the time, and I think I have a couple more minutes. So I do want to just share what happened after, because I've never experienced anything like this. And at the time, it felt 100% irrefutable. And now I'd say that it still feels pretty close to that. With time, there's always, at least for me anyway, part of my process is like, was that real? But it still feels so real. What happened after that is it was almost like I was initiated, and Mama Ayahuasca recognized that I fully let go, that I really just let go and let her take me where I needed to go. And at that point, it was like I got granted access to a kingdom. And I had an experience where I was immersed in it. It felt like it was underground. It felt like if I were to look up, I would see the roots of trees. And I was in an open space, like a cavern, sort of, where maybe normally there would be dirt. And all of the roots were these neon colors. There were neon mushrooms, there were serpents. And I was just floating in them, almost like if anyone's gone scuba diving, imagine doing a night dive where you have this, I forget what it's called, the glow that happens with different fish and various crustaceans in the sea, luminous or luminescence or something like that. Imagine that feeling where you're just floating and you're looking around. And I just got these, it was a knowing that I was allowed in to see where I think she lives. And everything slowed down, and I've never experienced that before, and I've never experienced it since, but it's like, it just made an imprint on me. And what I can say now is that me reparenting myself did something that I used to wait for my father to apologize in a way that I wanted him to, and he never did. And so I blocked him. And by reparenting myself and giving myself that full freedom to have all of my emotions, that block went away. And as I said, my father passed, but for the first time, I have his pictures on my wall. I have a collage from his funeral that was in storage for 10 years. And now it's on my wall. And I regularly look at it, but I also, when I have my journeys, I do work with him. And I've been able to understand him and see him as a human being with faults and his own struggles and challenges, which before I knew intellectually, and I wanted to forgive him, but this is like a cellular knowing of, oh my gosh, of course you had problems staying faithful. You didn't feel good about yourself, or, whatever the case may be. There's been a lot of acceptance, and I've realized I didn't need him to be here in order for me to heal the relationship. That's what I'm doing now. And I really credit this journey was such a huge turning point for me. So with that, I think I will turn it back to Bob. I feel complete. Thank you, everyone.
The teacher in me always kind of picks some things that people touch upon that I like to sort of like foreground a little bit, so that for folks who don't necessarily have experience with this. So you were talking about having some trouble purging. So part of what that, my sense is part of what that comes from is, that kind of like desire to purge comes from this idea that everybody does it, so I should do it too. And we also have typically a very specific idea of what it means to purge, right? So you probably, most people at least get dry heaps and spend a little bit of time over their purge buckets. And what I learned in my practice was that sometimes it's energy that gets purged. Mm-hmm. If you're sweating, sometimes it's what needs to come out is coming out in the sweat. If it's sometimes people shake violently, and that's another way that that these things are coming, they're purging up out of our bodies. And I had a laugh when you were talking about taking hape and how you said, well, I didn't purge, but surely stuff came out of your nose, right?
Eventually, when I was allowed to blow my nose, yes.
Yeah. So that thing's like, it's another way to purge, right? It's getting that stuff that's out of the deep recesses of your nasal cavities. And if you've ever been adventurous enough to look at what's in the in your tissues when that happens, like, you're purging, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes people will inadvertently swallow the tobacco juice and then actually vomit. Um, I took me it took me a full year of ayahuasca ceremonies before something actually came out of my stomach. And when I very first started doing it, I'm, I'm I'm much less a materialist now than I was then, but I'm a very, very skeptical person. And so the way that the Brazilians kind of structure the ceremonies, there's a point at which most people start feeling sick and or feeling well, depending on how you want to look at it, and they start purging. And I was acutely aware of the curandero encouraging everybody to purge. And I'm sitting there going, fuck no, I'm not purging on command. They're not going to control my mind. And so you kind of like play all these, you confront these really deep things about yourself, like in like your ideas about what a purge means, and when and whether you should do it, and what it means to purge. And the other thing I wanted to touch base on that I thought was brilliant and insightful in your journey was the first time you were offered the hape and you knew that you'd had enough. Because in the ceremonies, there's you're in a circle and you've paid a fair bit of money to be there, and there's this big pressure to do everything that everybody's doing, whether that's right for you or not. And it was I was so pleased to hear that that you kind of knew, like, I know myself, I know that this isn't right for me today, and then you didn't do that. So that's like another thing, like in ceremony space, you got to pay attention to yourself.
Mhm.
In the end, that medicine is all about putting you in touch with what's on the inside. Not It's not a magic wand. So those are my comments on that. Sorry for doing a little bit of teaching, but I just occupational predilection. So next up on our list of people to share stories is Mareesa Stertz. So Mareesa is a filmmaker, community organizer, and KRI certified Kundalini yoga teacher. She's co-founder and media director at Lucid News and is the producer and host of the documentary series, The Healing Powers of Psychedelics and Other Mindful Practices, currently streaming on Gaia TV. Mareesa is the founder of the aforementioned Psychedelic Leadership Summits, a series of workshops focused on building relationships within the community and creating space for important conversations. She's passionate about finding solutions to systemic problems, and her work is heavily informed by her own journey of healing, which has taken her all around the world, filming the curanderos of Peru and the holy men of India. Uh, so I met Mareesa last October at the Psychedelic Leadership Summit, and we've stayed in touch off and on, and we're sort of, I guess, now sort of part of the same circle of folks. And so I was so thankful that she was willing to come on camera and share a story. I can't wait to hear this story. Mareesa plans to share how LSD helped her realize she had been unconsciously continuing an abusive cycle from childhood, and the role that saran wrap and S&M could play in unwinding this pattern of pain.
Thanks for the intro. I'm calling in from Costa Rica, and the internet is sometimes a little sketchy. So apologies if I cut out. If I just cut out completely, give me like a minute, and if I don't come back, move on, and we'll see what happens. But it seems to be pretty good right now. So, all right. So, yeah, I should preface with saying, I have been on my healing path probably my whole life, but really like dedicated over the last 4 years. And, I've been pretty much trying to find any tool in the box and see what could help me deal with my debilitating anxiety and my, just like failure to thrive in life in pretty much every different way a person could thrive. And I saw this psychic who gave me a reading, and she said, you don't love yourself at all. And you're actually really quite mean to yourself. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I love myself. I totally love myself, and in hindsight, I love myself as much as I could, as I had been taught to love myself, or, and as I had experienced love in childhood. But that experience of love, it's just you replicate what you experienced in your childhood. And if I compare that to where I am now, it's a whole different ballgame. So I think it's really interesting how unaware I was of how I was treating myself. So to go on with this healing journey, about 4 years ago, I started finding people using psychedelics intentionally to heal. I'd encountered ayahuasca a little bit before, but was living in LA at the time and hadn't really found my crowd there. Found them and started really diving in deep. And I took some LSD with a couple of friends at 9 a.m. and we're sitting there, music's nice, we were hanging out on couches and nicely lit living room and waiting, or not even waiting, but like LSD is kicking in pretty serious. And out of nowhere, a friend of mine comes at me, grabs me at the shoulders and shakes me a little bit violently. Was like, how do you not know how great you are? And I rose up at her and I started laughing. And every fiber of my being wanted to get hit. And I wanted with every ounce of myself to be destroyed. And it was such an odd thing that I never really experienced this feeling except back childhood, the time when I had completely forgotten that this was a thing. There's a road. I'm really loud truck. So my friend, she looks at me, I'm laughing, and I'm like completely alert looking at her, and she goes, "Whoa there, sister, I'm not going there with you, but I know a place." So a week later, without any LSD in my system, she takes me to an S&M club in the valley of Los Angeles, this sort of questionable place where they have sessions in the middle of the afternoon. It was like 2 p.m. And we walk in, and there's this whole like secret card you get, and you got to know the people. And she knows the woman who runs the club, and the woman who runs the club has a really good understanding of human psychology, what makes people tick, why people come to S&M clubs. And I tell her a bit of my story, that my father, though he loved us so much, he was also abusive. And I had such a good childhood in so many ways, but the temper that he had was really rough. And she looks at me, and I tell her the story that happened with my friend and the LSD and the shake and the desire to be destroyed. And she looks at me and she goes, I think you want to get tied up. And I was like, no, if I ever had a thing, yeah, I guess getting tied up would be interesting. And there's this cute guy that's running around who's also new to this whole experience. And we talk, and then he's like, yeah, let me tie you up. I'll tie you up. So there's saran wrap, and this, like, there's a room that's kind of removed from all of the other hubbub where lots of interesting things are going on. And I was not in any space to like embark on this adventure in public. I was like, is there kind of a quieter room? So we get pointed out to the quiet couples room, and there's this like cross that's like standing upright and leaning back a little bit. And the woman who's holding the space, she's like, yeah, tie yourself up on that cross like this with saran wrap. And, this is PG-13 pretty much, and I'm still in my underwear. The nice army guy is taking the saran wrap and tying me up to this T-bar. And she comes along and she's got this, what they call, I think, cat o' nine tails, a little whip, and tells me how S&M works. You know, there's, you're in charge. The person receiving is in charge. Red is stop. Orange is you're getting uncomfortable. You're getting a little too harsh. Pain that you're inflicting is a little too much. And then green is go. You know, and safe words so that people can yell, stop, 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 even though they want more. And so she explains all this and takes this little whip and starts whipping my body in a little bit and all the juicy parts. And it's kind of exciting. It's a bit like a little rough sex. It's sort of, you know, it's just, it wakes up the senses in a way that, yeah, it's fun. I got the cute guy there kissing my feet, and the whole thing is just like this funny circus happening, and it's all very entertaining and a little erotic. And then she gets up to my face and she puts the whip down and takes her open palm and goes, "Is this okay?" You know, and she kind of gives my face a little pat, and then out of nowhere, hits me really hard, but not too hard. And I just start bawling. All this energy just like erupts from me. And as I start to piece together what was going on, I start to realize that a lot of the destructive like a lot of the things that had been contributing to my unhappiness, like I had a really bad skin issue where I could never leave it alone. If I ever saw any fly, I would pick at it and I would destroy it. And I would destroy my skin in the process. I couldn't, it was a very like almost compulsive issue. And I drank too much and wore my system out so that I was never feeling good in my body. I couldn't focus, so I was never satisfied with anything I was doing in work. And so all these things, all these ways I was not being kind to myself. These were all destructive patterns that I had. And what I saw was that I was completely unconscious of them. I had no idea that I'd been doing this to myself. I had no idea that there was a part of me that really wanted to feel that destruction, that really craved it, because in childhood, it was very closely linked to the love I also received and the love I craved. You know, it's those wires had gotten twisted in childhood, love and pain all together in the same place. So, you know, my craving for love in a way, or my craving for pain was really actually just interlinked with that craving for love. And to make it conscious, to be in a space where I am in charge and I have those reins to say stop, go, and to inflict the pain intentionally or have it inflicted intentionally was the most empowering thing that opened this whole door, a series of doors, a whole hallway of doors that showed me all the ways that I had been doing it to myself unconsciously. And this was the beginning of a huge shift for me. And once we have those keys, everything began to unlock slowly. Yeah. And that's just one chapter of so many chapters of healing, but that's my story.
Well, thank you so much, Mareesa. I met Kristen when I was organizing with Thank You Plant Medicine for the World of Wisdom project, and she kind of jumped in and offered to help out, and then we wrangled her into telling a story that night as well, and now we stay in touch, and it's been so wonderful to meet so many brilliant human beings in this community. So Kristen is a teacher, writer, dancer, and Reiki master. She currently teaches high school science full-time and Reiki part-time, and she also co-facilitates ayahuasca ceremonies. So Kristen plans to share a story about the importance of remaining grounded throughout the ceremony and how it relates to remaining grounded in life. This vital lesson comes from a not so pleasant ayahuasca ceremony in which psychosis was triggered during integration once she was back home. So
So thank you for the introduction. And I've done quite a lot over the few years sharing my experiences with ayahuasca in various different platforms. And the story I'm going to share tonight, I don't talk about as much because it's kind of the darker side, so to speak, of ayahuasca and plant medicine work that people don't talk about as much. But I think part of the reason I haven't been in a place to openly share as much because I was still processing a lot of what had happened and trying to learn the lessons, throughout it, so then I could actually share it from a different place. So my first experience with ayahuasca was intense, but it felt safe the entire time. Where I was doing it, there was a guest shaman from Peru who held like a very beautifully safe container, and I could journey really deeply without any issues. The second time I went, I had this feeling that I really shouldn't go, but I was kind of in this rush to like go even deeper than last time and really just dive deep into healing. And, so also my first ceremony experience, I went with a friend. The second time I went completely by myself, so I didn't know anybody there. They didn't have a guest shaman. There was just several different facilitators kind of holding the space. And the whole thing felt very chaotic and fragmented. The first night, I hardly really experienced much of anything. The spirit of ayahuasca just kept telling me to wait. Every time I would feel a shift, like maybe something was going to happen, she just kept telling me to wait. I ended up kind of spending some time reflecting on what I even wanted my intention to be. But it just felt like I couldn't really sink into the medicine like at all. And so the second night, I hoped to have a little bit more progress. That's where things just got really intense and shifted in this really weird way. The whole ceremony just like felt off once again. And people around me were purging and vomiting like a lot. And I wasn't. But the energy just felt, like I said, there's just this chaotic, something was going on. I hardly had like any actual experiences within ceremony because I did not feel safe. And I remember there would be moments where I would start to journey, and then it's like I would instantly get thrown out of it. And until the past, really honestly, month, I had no idea why. I was like, I guess I just didn't feel safe enough or whatever. And in my very first ceremony, one of the biggest things she kept telling me was to make sure I was focusing on my breath, because I would stop breathing during ceremony quite often because I would be so overwhelmed. And so this time a similar thing was happening. I wanted to go really deep and journey, but in the process, I wanted to, it was like I didn't realize up until this point in my life that although I was just starting to open the door into this realm of healing work, and I didn't realize that I still was so ungrounded. And so I wanted to go so deep and like journey and do, all these things, but I wasn't grounded enough just in my daily life. So then when it came to ceremony, she was like, I guess, like forcing me to like stop, because every time she would start to take me somewhere, it's like she would throw me out of it. And I remember being like, come on, like I'm ready, like I trust you. And when she would throw me out of it, I remember looking at the fire, because there was a fire, and I would not be sitting like straight or in alignment. I'd be like leaning over in these really weird positions. And it felt like something was pushing me to be up straight. And I remember I would like hold my hand in front of my face and try to breathe. And like the facilitators had, gone over like the 4-part breath where you breathe and count of 4 and like hold for 4 and exhale for 4 and things like that. And I remember I couldn't even like count to 4. I was like, I don't even remember like how to count. It was like I couldn't even remember how to breathe, something that should be automatic. And I was like, well, okay. And I was just so confused. And but I still had this urge to like journey. So she would take me a little bit, and then it would seem like just a few minutes and I was just back in the same situation. And then I'd be all over here like this, and like something would push me. And yeah, it was just like she was trying to tell me, like, you're not grounded. Like, we cannot journey if you're not still anchored here. It was a kind of like, the idea is to be in both worlds at once, but not just one or the other. She was really like not, wanting to take me anywhere if I still was not at least a little bit aware of like the 3D reality and my body. It's like she didn't want me to get lost in the spirit realm, especially since there were not like facilitators holding like a really strong container to watch out for things like that happening. And so at one point it was like she just completely left, and I was laying there watching all these other people like deep in the medicine. Like this one person next to me was just like, doing all this weird stuff. He ended up like going and running around, and I was just like, this is just so bizarre. I'm just gonna lay down. Obviously, like there's a reason things aren't happening. And they overbooked a little bit for the weekend as well. There hadn't been as much food. I don't do well when I like completely fast. I need a little bit of stuff. So I started to feel really lightheaded, like my blood sugar was dropping, and it's not really recommended you eat during ceremony. So I was like really hesitant to even ask for like a snack. So I'm like, I don't know. But I finally got, the attention of someone, and she brought me a whole bunch of different things. I took like one bite of something and was like, okay, maybe this isn't a good idea. And then that's when things shifted to where I experienced something. This part of the story like is still very like hard to put into words, but it's like everything flipped, and I no longer felt like I had any awareness of anything. I was not aware of my body. I was not aware of the ceremony space. I was no longer even aware like of the presence of like the ayahuasca spirit, because I was kind of depleted and weak, but also I had never listened to ayahuasca to get grounded. It was like there was all this open space, not just within my body, but within my energy field. And like something else got invited in, and it pretended to be ayahuasca, but it was not. And it was just giving me all these weird instructions. And I remember thinking like, this is not the way like she teaches me, like this is not something she would say. But I was so exhausted. I was like, well, maybe it's just different this time. And I don't know. And a lot of the facilitators were going to sleep because everybody seemed fine. And I'm still here, like just struggling. I felt like something was pulling me to take me to the spirit world, but I didn't feel safe enough to go there because I didn't feel like I was going to be able to get back, and that I would just be lost out there and for who knows how long. And so it was just like really bizarre. And I remember laying down at one point, and I was barely aware of my body, but it was enough to know that I had stopped breathing. And I don't know for how long that happened, but I remember just like sitting up and like gasping for air and like just really confused, still very ungrounded at this point. And eventually the sun came up and I was like, well, maybe that was just like me fighting the medicine. I wasn't surrendering, yada, yada, yada. And I felt okay when the sun came up. But as I got ready to leave, I just felt like something was off, and I didn't have the words to explain something, but I didn't feel like I had ever fully came back into my body within the ceremony. There was a part of me that was still like doing some kind of work somewhere else with some kind of other like being or spirit, and I wasn't really like fully, in my body. Because driving was strange, like everything was strange. I finally like make it home, and every night when I laid down to go to sleep, it was like ceremony was full on, like the ceremony I would have expected. And I was like, okay, well, it can stay in your system, a few nights, or whatever. It happened to me before where I'd have some dreams or things that would be kind of intense. But it happened like every night for a week. It was like, I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. I would talk to some people. They didn't really have any answers. I didn't end up sleeping for 2 weeks at all. And it was really hard for me to remember like who I was. I couldn't remember my name some days. I was okay if I was around other people or outside, because it felt like I was like, okay, I like remember how like to be me. And I felt, and it was because I was grounded, like they were grounding me. Their energy was grounded. It was reminding me of what it's like to be in your body. But then I would go home to my apartment where I live by myself, and it's like, I would just like, leave. And it got to one point where I was just doing like things I would not normally do, that I don't really want to go into, but just like, it was like, I like, there's no words. And I was like, just something isn't right. Something isn't right. And I ended up going into like a full blown like psychosis. I had to be hospitalized. And it took quite some time to like sort things out. But in reflecting, like, it was just, she had revealed to me how ungrounded I really was. And she was trying to show me within ceremony, and I didn't understand the message. But then when I got home, the awareness was starting to be there of how ungrounded I was, but I didn't know how to like fix it. And I didn't have a strong circle of people who had experience with integration in that way, or like a therapist or anybody. But since then, in all of my reflection I've done is just like, all the trauma I had had in my life up until that point. It's like I was so fragmented, and I learned at a very early age that my body didn't feel safe, that Earth, like life here on Earth, did not feel safe. And, I didn't realize I was just like this shell of a person, or like this zombie who just always wore this mask of like, everything's fine and I'm okay and I'm happy enough, and it also made me realize when we're not grounded, when we don't feel safe, our energy field can become very open, and it's like these holes that are there for like, other things and energies to come in and just take over. And it could be something really simple, just like a friend you have's energy kind of comes in for a little bit and you feel more strongly than you would. And it's like you never are really owning your energy. And so it's like you don't really know who you are either. And so that was another thing, you know, through integration, she taught me, and she's like, you're always somebody else because you're not confident in who you are and you don't feel safe in your body. So when you're around other people, like you just like take on their energy and you end up like liking the same things they like, doing the same things they do, and you don't even realize that's what you're doing. And I mean, it's just like layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of all of these things. And I mean, I took a really long break from working with the medicine because she was like, part of the reason like the psychosis happened is because you went to re-drink when you weren't ready. You hadn't integrated your first ceremony. And it was just, you're a very sensitive person. And it was just like too much for your system at one time to try to process everything. And repressed memories and things were released during that ceremony as well. So it was just like this big, it was like Pandora's box was just like wide open. And I had no idea what to do with that or how to integrate it or how to ground it, because before going into that ceremony, I wasn't grounded. So then after ceremony, it was like, what even is the ground? You know, like I remember I was going on a walk with my dog, and it felt like my feet weren't even touching the grass. Like I was like, I can't even feel my feet. Like this is so weird. But through just constant showing up, and several months later, I met my Reiki teacher, and going through Reiki training with her was like, you know, just helped me understand so much more about that subtle energy field. It helped me learn to like distinguish between my energy and somebody else's, and to know when I am grounded and when I am not, when I am embodied and when I am not. And that was just like the first step. And of course, the second step was kind of reparenting myself, which is something that's already been mentioned, and letting, you know, those parts of me that didn't feel safe, asking them what they needed to feel safe. And, you know, sometimes it would be sleeping with the light on, you know, like I was talking to like, you know, 4-year-old part of myself or something, or like sleeping with an extra blanket, just like little things like that. Sometimes, or I mean, those are just really simple examples. But yeah, it's been such an interesting journey. And even in retelling the story, the the way I'm explaining it and the way I'm touching on it is completely different, because it did also happen 3 years, almost 3 years ago. So I'm far enough removed from the experience now where it does almost feel like that's not even me. Like, because I am a much more grounded person. And I remember when I first started co-facilitating, one of the girls in ceremony who was a participant told me, like, this was like a year after, she's like, yeah, I always felt really like nervous when you would come over to help me because you just didn't seem like you were even in your body. Like, and she's like, and I've tried to be like grounded in this ceremony and you didn't feel grounded. And I was just like, oh, like I didn't even know that was still a thing. But I happened to see her a couple weeks ago, and the first thing she said to me was, whoa, like you're so grounded now. And I was like, oh, okay, good. Like the work I'm doing and like all this stuff is like, you know, helping. And the main thing is just the very first lesson from my very first ceremony: breathing, you know, the quality of your breath. So, you know, I noticed on days where I'm not connected to my breath, it's harder to stay grounded. It's harder to stay aware of things and to, you know, be calm. So I do like yoga every day, even if it's only 10 minutes. Hape has also been mentioned as well. I do that quite often to keep me grounded, but occasionally I've noticed if I do it too much, it has like the opposite effect, and like kind of shakes my energy up a little too much. So it's all about balance, making sure I'm hydrated. I feel like need more water than the average person. Like there's some days where I feel like I drink like gallons of water and it's still like not enough. But I feel like I run kind of hot, and in general, like I process a lot of energy of myself and others and whatnot. And I find drinking water helps, and just sitting down and taking the time to ask myself some questions, and self-care, asking my body, like, what do you need? Sometimes it just wants to move. It's tired of, sitting still or being stagnant. And yeah, this is really interesting because I had no idea like how the story was going to come forward, and I'm saying not at all what I had planned. So I'm just like, what's next? I don't know. I think I'm kind of finished. But yeah, I've heard, and I guess it's kind of similar to what you were saying with gratitude. People constantly are like, oh, you need to be grounded. Being grounded is so important. And until like you have, an experience that just like, like forces you to be like, you are not grounded, like, and you are going to lose your mind one day if you're not grounded. I'm like, oh, whatever. And then I lost my mind one day because I wasn't grounded. And it was like, oh, okay, maybe people don't just say this stuff is important, but it really is. And I've noticed I'm able to live my life with just a lot more freedom and joy, being more grounded and more embodied. It doesn't mean everything's sunshine and rainbows every day, but I just feel like I've given myself permission as well to just feel and process emotions and know that it's safe to do that, and that I can hold space for myself to cry if I need to, instead of just holding it in because like, oh, well, I don't feel safe now, and I don't feel safe now, and here I don't feel safe either, so then I'll just never cry. And then you just bottle all that stuff up inside. So yeah, I think that's it. I feel like I went all over the place, but whatever.
No, actually, you didn't. Thank you so much. So you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you, which was, what are you doing for grounding? So you do yoga, Reiki, and hape and breathing, right? That's kind of what's. So do you have a memory of when you finally felt like your feet were planted on the ground firmly?
Yeah, I think I was actually going to like an ecstatic dance class. And I remember taking my shoes off and touching the floor. And it almost felt like this like weird, like static electricity or something. And it like went up my legs and then like back down. And I just felt like the floor in a way like I had never felt before. And as I danced and as I moved, it was like I just felt like I had like a whole new body. I think it was just a few months like after, or maybe no, it was like a couple years later. So it took a while to like really process and integrate. But that was like the first moment when I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to like be in your body. Because I mean, I grew up a dancer, but it still was like just different to actually move in that way.
So you brought up another interesting thing, which is integration. So that's a word that people seem to toss around in the in the medicine community, and I'm always curious to know what people do for integration, how you manage that, because there's a sort of, I call it, we might think of it as the evangelical wing of the medicine community. Will tell you, you go to Peru for 2 weeks, drink a lot of ayahuasca, and you come back all better. And of course, most people that do this already like the time realize that that's just not at all how it works, and that the name of the game is this sort of ongoing relationship with the experiences that you have in the form of some way of kind of like embodying it and integrating it. So what things do you do to integrate?
Yeah, so to me, integration is just spending time to process and reflect on things that happened within the ceremony, to, just soak up all the knowledge possible, and then taking action to make some changes within like your daily life or your routine, or whatever you need to do, shifting around your relationships, your jobs, whatever. And I guess I do so many different things to integrate, but I think my favorite is journaling and just writing a whole bunch of stuff down, or I call it like a brain dump, or where it doesn't have to necessarily be structured. Maybe you draw like pictures, maybe you write down just words or phrases and just fill up a piece of paper, and it may not make sense at first, and then when you look at it, you start to see some patterns. And just, I don't know, I still like meditating, reconnecting to ceremony space with music helps a lot too. And then sometimes I feel like I'm like right back in that space, and I can kind of rewatch that scene when I'm not actually fully like in the medicine, and I can be like, oh, so that's what that was. Those are just a couple of things that help me personally.
So do you find that over time things kind of click in unexpected times?
Oh, absolutely. Like sometimes I'll be driving and I'll just be like, I'll hear like something on the radio, or I'll just like see like an animal on the side of the road or something random, and it just like, I'm like, oh, that's what that one little thing was. Yeah, because a couple months ago that happened. Like I'm still like integrating from like the very first ceremony. There's like sometimes where like something will trigger something like from the first ceremony, and I'm like, oh, that's what she was trying to tell me, or like that's what that might have meant, or I can't think of a specific example, but
I got, because I mean that happened to me tonight when I was kind of revisiting what happened with my demons, both last year when I was in Ecuador, and then the year before when I met them in an ayahuasca space. And I was like, I said, they weren't there to give me a hard time. They were there to help. And I told them, fuck off, because I didn't really understand at the time. And now I do. Oh, crazy. All right. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Yes? Okay. We're going to bring Nicole. She's back from she's back from internet purgatory. Power went out and came back. So Nicole and I met in Ecuador last year. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. We did a lot of chatting over the course of the 2.5 weeks, and she's going to tell a story about why she left camp a little earlier, I think, than we were hoping that she would do. So Nicole was born and raised in Miami, Florida, where she's once again residing and rebuilding her practice as an energy healer. She's been on the path of healing and learning from traditional plant medicine ceremonies, yoga, herbal medicines, transpersonal energy healing, and somatic therapies. Nicole is passionate about supporting others along their journey of healing and remind them of their unique gifts and innate wisdoms. And she is brilliant at that, by the way. She's such a great listener. Nicole plans to share an experience that she had in Ecuador at a plant medicine retreat, where we gathered to cleanse our bodies, minds, hearts, and energy with the help of sacred plants and the curanderos. I'm murdering the Spanish part, sorry, lo siento, and curanderos. It was here that she decided to slow down her walking, her talking, her thoughts, and her actions. And the other lesson was to feel her body and remember that her mind doesn't always have to know what, why, or how. So, Nicole?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Bob, for inviting me and pushing me out of my comfort zone.
It's my
Because
job.
I don't normally talk about my experiences with ceremony and plant medicine. So it's like, yeah, it's been really cool hearing everyone's experiences, and yeah, and seeing, like, wondering what's going to come out of my mouth. But so yeah, I have been working with different medicines since I was like in high school, but I think it was uh, almost 7 years ago when I started with ceremony, and it completely changed my view on these. Rather than maybe before I saw them, I used them recreationally. It helped me to not only have a respect for them, but see them as medicines and start learning on how the ceremony is like a way of life. And it's, you know, I think what I have learned from it and what I'm still learning is like that the the teachings want to just sweep into like the all of our life, and in our daily life. And um, I've had really strong, intense times on on different medicines, but I think like my memories of it is that it's been gentle overall, um, because I've, I guess, been building a relationship with grandmother medicine and grandfather, and just learning how to pray and how to learn from these traditions. And last January of 2019, I went to Ecuador for a plant medicine retreat with grandmother ayahuasca medicine. And there, it was like completely life-changing because, we live in a society where we're constantly on our phones, on the computer, in the rat race, like go, go, go. Everything is like fast paced. And I had the opportunity to, be disconnected from my phone for 2 weeks. Um, just, it was just me, my tent, the mountain that has beautiful energy. And it's like up in a cloud forest, and just being surrounded with animals and with people that it wasn't a lot of people, and the people that were there to do some deep healing and just to connect to themselves. And basically I haven't even talked about this experience, but throughout this quarantine time, I've been integrating it and remembering the lessons from there, and just how, I since I didn't have my phone to distract me, or you know I didn't have the usual things um, to occupy my mind. And so I was really stuck with my mind, and I was just noticing how I drive myself crazy, basically. And it was like, I mean, the medicine was really helping me clean my mind and my thoughts. And I just remember like walking, because my tent was really far from the bathroom. And I remember I was walking really fast to go to the bathroom, and I realized, why am I in such a hurry? Like there's no, I don't have to use the bathroom that bad. I'm just, I'm here in this, like in nature, in, disconnecting, and I'm here to heal. But the programming of like, go, 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 and just being like stuck in the mind was, the medicine was showing me that. And so throughout those 2 weeks, I was just learning how to slow down and how to walk slower, how to, um, you know, just like slow down in general. And yeah, and I was learning how to just be with my emotions and be with the difficult things that were coming up without having to really understand why it was coming up, or for what reason, or like the mind was like finally taking a step back. And that's just something I've been practicing, in life in general, is like having that experience helped me see that I didn't have to understand things all the time. I didn't have to know um, why this difficult emotion was coming up, or how to fix it, or it was just, oh, okay, I feel that, and like it doesn't have to mean anything. Like it's just there, and it's just, and the body, um it was right before I started my training in somatic experiencing. I know Suzanne was also trained in that, and I did the beginning year, but I hadn't even started the training, and I was having my experience on the medicine, and I felt like she was showing me how to do the work, already. And it was like trauma release work. And it's really like getting out of the head and just being in the experience of the body, and letting the body's like intelligence, do what it needs to do. And so, yeah, that it's interesting talking about the experience, because I feel like it was such a profound time, and that I feel like maybe I'm talking about it and it's not. It's like diluting it or something. But I hope this is like, um, I guess, valuable to whoever's listening. And yeah, that's pretty much my experience with that mountain and that retreat. And that's where I met Bob later in the year. The mountain was so powerful and special that I decided to go back again the same year for Vision Quest. And I met Bob and many lovely, amazing people. And um, yeah, I think like with the medicines, there's just like this deep, profound wisdom that like seeps into your life. And it's like, I was kind of nervous because I'm like, how do I talk about it? I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting to try and to like, share these experiences. And hearing some of your experiences has been like a learning for me too. So I think I'm the shortest storyteller, but I'll answer questions if you have any, Bob.
Oh, Nicole, you're so funny. Don't compare. Everybody, just like with the medicine, everyone's story journey is their own. So try not to try not to worry about anything like that. So one of the things I thought was interesting, and this happens. I don't know how the hell this happens, except that I feel like the universe kind of like just does the curation for me. The themes have kind of like come up, like there's the idea of reparenting came up, integration came up, this, and that kind of those are threads that kind of pull through all the stories, and I found that really fascinating. So what do you do? What did you do to integrate the lessons that you learned on that ayahuasca retreat? Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about that when you asked somebody else that question, and I was
Kristen,
wondering.
yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know if I do anything in particular. Um, I think like it's the relationship that I feel like learning how to communicate with the medicines and with the spirit, and really being present in the ceremony, like in as far as h- why I'm there, and and then I just, and in the prayer, and then I just kind of trust that the integration is going to happen. Um, and yeah, and like the ayahuasca retreat that was in January, it'll be 2 years, and I think I'll be integrating that for the rest of my life, because it's like I said before, it's just a profound and deep thing and we're healing like, transgenerational trauma and deep things that we can't really pinpoint. So,
That's
um,
the bit, right? It's like that you could the transgenerational trauma thing, because there's so much that there's so much goes into. There were so many people that went into making us who we are, right? It's just,
mhm.
and if you're, I know, like for myself, my family comes from different parts of Europe, but when they came here 100 years ago or whatever, like they all left whatever was in the old country behind. So I have no idea, but that they brought their mess with them.
Well, yeah, and when you ask about the integration, actually, there's different things that like different healing modalities that we just end up in. Well, I say we because I know some of us here have, with SE and IFS, and so those are the integrating, um, like they help us integrate. I know family constellation work was extremely powerful, and it helped me understand also that, like what you said, Bob, about the ancestors. Yeah, it's all the stuff, but then we also have their resiliency and their strength, and they're like backing us up because they see us and they're like, oh, they have an opportunity to like transform all of this.
Right, and
Yeah.
they know that we can help them as well. It's funny because I've in my medicine work, I've thought, because I hear all these stories about people doing ancestor work. So in one of my ceremonies, I set the intention. I want to connect with my ancestors, and when I'm in that sort of non-ordinary reality state, I kind of have like this sort of like light about me, and then the light extends out, sort of about as far as the campfire might extend around me, and I'm often conscious of beings that are sort of like in the darkness, just on the edge of the light. So I'm lying there going, ancestors, come, come on, come on, come on. And one representative kind of poked not his entire body, but like enough of it for me to recognize who it was. And they said, we took a vote. We're not helping you until you take responsibility for your own shit. So work out your stuff first, then we'll talk. And it was like, oh gee, thanks. Because I think that like when I went into it, like I really had this idea of like about working on the ancestral trauma rather than just, and to the exclusion of the gifts that to the gifts that they can bring to the table, and how amazing it is that any one of us actually ever exist. Because when you do the math, millions of sperm, one egg in a particular, in a particular moment, and in all of eternity, like anyone that's breathing won the lottery, right? And so, but we can fall into a space where we can blame all our problems on how badly our ancestors screwed up and what they did to our parents, our grandparents, and so on and so on and so on. So kind of interesting.
Many
Uh,
perspectives, and
yeah, yeah. And then, Suzanne, I thought this was really cool that that idea of like sub personalities. It's something that I've sort of like come to in my own integration work, because I journal, and so I kind of like I give each of those different voices, they're like I make them a person and let them do their own talking for them. So it's kind of interesting to hear a name for and that there's actually a whole practice around that kind of that way of relating to the self.
Yeah, it's really powerful. If what's wild is that when I'm working with my clients, for example, I will ask them to suspend their disbelief, and if they're willing, we go for it. And I'll ask questions like, so how old is this part? And an answer will just be blurted out before they even know. They'll be like, 8. Where did that come from? And we'll ask, what's the job of this part? It's like, to protect me from XYZ. And it's really, really amazing work. And it's what I love about it is that it actually provides more of a crystal clear lens on the specific pieces that you're working on. It really helps eliminate the chaos. Takes some work to get there, but once you eliminate the chaos, you're really able to tend to what that part needs. So it's good stuff.
And that's, for me, like one of the things I found was that I've become very mindful of my self-talk, and so I kind of now I know who's doing the talking, and I also know when to argue. When to say, no, that's bullshit. We already talked about this. You're not going to fool me. You're not going to fool me again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay,
Suzanne, can I ask Suzanne a question about?
Sure.
So with the IFS, you said like the chaos kind of, like once you get through that, then there's like a deeper connection, right? To like this yourself. And then I'm sure like the chaos comes back up, but it's just not as, like you understand it better.
Yeah. The way that I explain it is, if you think about it, you have your core self. This is the part of you that has always existed, that will never be destroyed. You might not have access to it, but it's the part of you that can be compassionate and curious and non-judgmental and embrace people for who they are. And so the concept of IFS is really to activate that part, bring that part online as much as possible. And you can do that through grounding or various techniques. And then see what else emerges. Sometimes clients have an agenda that they want to work with a particular part. A lot of times it's like, what's here? And once you'll have sort of like a family of parts that emerge, and you identify the one that needs tending to right now. And the goal really is just to get to know the part without any agenda, without asking it to stop doing what it's doing. But you really want your core self to be the one engaging with it. And when I talk about it, it sort of eliminates the chaos. I'm talking about those other family members, those subpersonalities. One by one, or as a group, you'll ask them if they're willing to just step back and give space. And again, this is one of those questions that I have clients ask, and they're like, yeah, they're stepping back. Like, who are these subpersonalities? And so once you have that space, you can really just start to get to know this subpersonality. Like, how old were you when you came online? How were you protecting me? Because when we're children, because we're not adults, we're limited in how we can protect ourselves to whatever age we are. So it might be that we throw tantrums, or it might be that we stuff all our feelings inside and we just get real quiet. And so then fast forward to when we're adults, if that part gets triggered, we suddenly now we're doing this. And if you're in a relationship, you don't want to talk to the person. And that's how you deal with it, because your body thinks you're under threat. It doesn't understand that you're now an adult and that, whoever caused that threat earlier. So when you can work with those parts and get to know them, it kind of brings them into the light. They get to know you, your core self, your adult, compassionate, strong, courageous self. And they start to relax a little and realize, oh, I don't need to run the show anymore because Nicole is here. She's an adult. And then you can ask, well, what would you want to do instead? I want to play with puzzles, or I want to draw, or I want to dance, or, and so it's like you create this whole new relationship. And this is my language, not necessarily IFS's, but I feel like it integrates those personalities back in with a healthier role to play. And it frees you up. And the more you do that, you're just peeling layers of trauma off, and you're just like SE, you're releasing through the process, I think SE and IFS together are amazing, because as you're working with these parts, you might have things like, you know, shaking, or you might start yawning and being like, where are these yawns coming from? And it's just like this release of trauma energy that's been trapped. And as you start peeling those layers and reintegrating these parts and welcoming them into your family, like in your real conscious awareness, you're able to access self more and more and more easily. It's incredible. Anyway, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Let me pause there. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
That's a great
you.
question. Hey, look, we're kind of done. I'd love, we can continue to hang out. Why don't I close off the Facebook Live, and then if you guys want to just hang out and chat, we can do that. So just hang on a second. All right, so that brings us to the end of the night. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for tuning in at a later date. I'm going to turn off the Facebook Live, and those of us who are left are going to chat a little bit. So thanks a lot for coming, and I look forward to seeing you all next month. Bye.